The sun was low in the sky, sending long golden streaks across the manicured grass of the cemetery. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the old oak trees, carrying with it a quiet sense of stillness that seemed to stretch endlessly. Among the rows of headstones, one man walked slowly, his expensive shoes making almost no sound against the gravel path. His suit was perfectly tailored, but it hung loosely over his thin frame as if the weight of his grief had taken something from him physically as well as emotionally. He carried a small bouquet of white lilies, his hand trembling slightly as he clutched them. The man's eyes were fixed on a single headstone ahead, one he had visited countless times in the weeks since the tragedy struck his life. He stopped in front of it, and his breath hitched. The name engraved on the cold marble seemed to stare back at him, and for a moment he could not speak. It was his son's name, the boy he had loved more than anything in the world. The boy who had been full of laughter, of curiosity of life, and who now was gone. The man knelt down, placing the lilies gently on the ground, brushing a finger across the name as if trying to feel his son's presence through the smooth stone. He closed his eyes and let the tears fall freely, something he rarely allowed himself to do in public. "Why did this happen?" he whispered into the empty air. His voice was barely audible, but it carried the weight of a man crushed by loss. The grief was raw and unrelenting, gnawing at him from the inside. In his office, surrounded by wealth and success, he had always believed he could control everything, that life could be managed with the right decisions and the right investments. But this was something no amount of money or power could fix. His son was gone and nothing could bring him back. He sat there for a long while, staring at the headstone, lost in memories. He remembered the day his son was born, the tiny fingers that had wrapped around his own. The first time he had heard that sweet, high-pitched laugh. He remembered the boy's first steps, the way he had chased butterflies in the garden, the way he had clutched a book close to his chest and insisted on reading aloud every night. Every memory was precious, and every memory now cut like a knife because it was all he had left. The sound of soft footsteps made him look up. At first, he thought it was just another visitor, perhaps someone paying respects to a loved one. But then he noticed a small figure sitting quietly near another grave, a little way off from where he was. She was a young girl, probably no older than 12 or 13, with tangled hair that fell across her face. Her clothes were worn and faded, the edges frayed from long use. She clutched something to her chest, a small bundle wrapped in a threadbare cloth, and she seemed completely absorbed in her own thoughts. The man hesitated. He was not used to seeing strangers in this part of the cemetery, especially children. His first instinct was to ignore her, to focus on his own grief and not be distracted by someone else's presence. But something about the girl caught his attention. There was a quiet strength in the way she sat, even though she looked so small and fragile. Her eyes, when she glanced up briefly, held a depth that seemed far beyond her years. There was a hint of sadness there, yes, but also something else, an unspoken resilience that made him pause. Curiosity overcame his hesitation. He stood and took a few steps closer, careful not to startle her. "Hello," he said softly, his voice gentle. The girl looked up fully then, her eyes wide with surprise. She did not run, did not cry, did not speak immediately. Instead, she studied him as if trying to understand who he was, why he had approached her. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he continued, keeping his distance. Are you here for someone?" The girl's grip on her small bundle tightened. She swallowed hard, and then her lips moved, forming words that were barely audible. I like it here," she said finally. "It's quiet. People don't bother you." He nodded slowly, sensing that there was much more behind her words than she was willing to say. "I understand," he replied. "Sometimes we come here to be alone with our thoughts." He gestured toward the headstone in front of him. "I'm here for someone too." His voice faltered, and he paused before adding, "My son." The girl's eyes softened slightly, though she did not speak. She shifted in her seat, and for a moment the two of them sat in silence, the only sounds the whispering wind and the distant call of birds. There was no awkwardness, no need for forced conversation. It was as if the quiet itself was enough to connect them. Finally, the man asked gently, "Do you come here often?" She nodded, her fingers still clutching the bundle tightly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "It's peaceful, and it reminds me that not everyone has a home. It makes me think." She paused, as if weighing her words. "I don't have anywhere else to go." The man's heart tightened at her words. He had expected sadness, yes, but hearing it so plainly spoken by someone so young and alone brought a new wave of pain, not just for his own loss, but for the struggles of this girl. He wanted to reach out to help, but he was not sure how. He was used to controlling situations, giving orders, making decisions that affected businesses and investments. But this was different. This required patience, understanding, and something he had not needed in years: emotional connection. "You're very brave," he said finally. "It takes a lot of courage to face life the way you do." The girl looked at him with a mixture of surprise and caution. "Brave?" she echoed. "I'm just surviving. That's what bravery is," he replied softly. "Finding a way to survive, even when everything seems impossible, is the most courageous thing anyone can do." She did not answer immediately. Instead, she lowered her gaze to her bundle and hugged it closer. The man noticed the weariness in her eyes, the way her small shoulders carried the weight of too many hardships. He wondered about her life, how she had ended up alone, and what challenges she faced every day just to get by. His mind, for the first time in weeks, turned away from his own grief and focused entirely on her. I don't know if anyone cares," she said finally, her voice small. "People pass by. Sometimes they look, sometimes they don't. But no one ever really stops." The man felt a pang in his chest. He wanted to tell her that he cared, that she was not invisible, but he hesitated. He had learned over the years that empty promises could hurt more than silence, so he stayed quiet, letting her words hang in the air between them. For a long while, they sat like that, two strangers bound by their own sorrows, sharing a silent understanding that did not require explanation. The man found himself drawn to her resilience, to the quiet dignity with which she faced her hardships. He wondered what her life had been like before she came here, what dreams she might have held, and what had brought her to this cemetery on this particular day. Finally, she spoke again. "Sometimes I come here and pretend that someone is waiting for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who will see me, who will care, maybe even believe in me." The man's throat tightened. He knew that feeling all too well, the longing for someone to notice, to care, to understand. And in that moment, he felt a strange, unexplainable connection to this girl. He could not fix her life immediately, and he did not know what tomorrow would bring. But he knew one thing: he could not walk away. Not today. Not when she was here, sitting quietly, holding her bundle and sharing a piece of her heart without even realizing it. He took a deep breath and said gently, "You are seen. You are not invisible, and you are not alone." The girl's eyes widened, and for a brief moment a flicker of hope appeared in her gaze. She did not speak, but the way she shifted slightly, a small smile tugging at her lips, told him she had heard him. That simple acknowledgement, the recognition of her existence and struggles, was enough to spark a connection that neither of them could have anticipated. The sun continued its slow descent, casting warm light across the cemetery, and the man realized that this encounter, which had begun so quietly and unexpectedly, was already changing something inside him. It was a small moment, almost insignificant to anyone else who might have passed by, but to them it mattered. It mattered more than he could have imagined. And in that quiet, unassuming space, by the side of a headstone marked with the name of a lost son, a fragile bridge was forming, between grief and hope, between loneliness and connection, and between two lives that would never be the same again. The man stayed a little longer, talking softly, listening intently, and simply being present. For the first time in weeks, he felt a subtle easing of the pain that had weighed him down so heavily, not because the loss had diminished, but because he had found a moment of shared humanity, a reminder that even in sorrow, there could be connection, and even in despair, there could be hope. As he finally stood to leave, he looked down at the girl one more time. "I'll see you again," he said quietly, not as a promise he expected to keep, but as an acknowledgement of the bond they had begun to form. She nodded, a small, shy gesture, clutching her bundle a little less tightly than before. And as he walked away, the man realized that today, at this quiet sea, meadery, something profound had begun, a story not yet written, a path not yet walked, but one that held the possibility of healing, of understanding, and of a life transformed in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The billionaire left the cemetery that day feeling a strange mix of emotions he had not expected. His grief, though still heavy, now carried a flicker of something different: curiosity, concern, and a small spark of hope. He could not stop thinking about the girl, her worn clothes, her tangled hair, and the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from her even in the face of so much hardship. Every moment since leaving, her words echoed in his mind. Sometimes I come here and pretend that someone is waiting for me, someone who will see me, who will care. He found himself wondering where she lived, how she survived, and whether she had anyone looking out for her at all. The idea of the girl going through life alone with no safety, no support, no one to guide her, gnawed at him. Despite all his wealth, he realized he had no way of truly understanding her world, and that thought both troubled and motivated him. He had spent years building a life of success, but never had he faced a situation that felt so immediate, so human, and so urgent. For the next few days, he could not focus on his usual work. Meetings felt dull, numbers meaningless, and decisions about investments felt trivial in comparison to the image of the girl sitting quietly in the cemetery. He remembered the small bundle she had been clutching to her chest and wondered what it contained. Perhaps it was a notebook, or a piece of cloth that reminded her of better days, or maybe even a small treasure she had found that gave her some comfort. He realized how little he truly knew about the lives of people who struggled, who had no protection from the harshness of the world. Unable to stop thinking about her, he returned to the cemetery a few days later. This time, he arrived early in the morning when the light was soft and the air carried a chill that made him wrap his coat tighter around himself. He walked slowly along the path, scanning the rows of headstones until he saw her sitting in the same spot as before. Her bundle rested beside her, and she was staring at the ground, lost in her thoughts. "Good morning," he said softly. Careful not to startle her, she looked up, and this time there was a hint of recognition in her eyes. She nodded slightly but remained quiet, studying him warily. "I brought some food," he said gently, holding out a small paper bag. "I thought you might like something to eat." Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment she seemed unsure what to do. Hunger was a constant companion for her, something she had learned to accept without complaint. But the sudden offer of kindness caught her off guard. Slowly she took the bag, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened it. Inside were simple things: a sandwich, some fruit, a bottle of water. She looked up at him, words finally forming on her lips. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "You don't have to thank me, I wanted to help." For a few minutes they sat in silence, eating slowly, the quiet of the cemetery surrounding them. He watched her take small bites, careful and deliberate, as if every mouthful mattered more than it should. It reminded him of the fragility of life, the way survival could become an all-consuming focus when resources were scarce. "Do you live around here?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "No," she said finally. "I move around. Sometimes I stay with friends, sometimes in shelters, sometimes wherever I can." He nodded, understanding that she was speaking the truth. Her life was uncertain, unstable, and entirely without the security most children took for granted. The thought made him ache inside. He had always tried to protect his own family, to provide them with the best, but this girl had no one looking out for her. No one to make her feel safe. "Do you go to school?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I can't. I have to work. To survive. To take care of my little brother and sister." His heart tightened. A wave of responsibility surged through him. Here was a child, barely old enough to understand the world, carrying the burden of responsibility for her siblings. The idea that she had no guidance, no support, and no one to help her dream was unbearable. He knew he could not solve all her problems immediately, but he felt an undeniable pull to try. "You're very brave," he said again, echoing the words he had spoken the first day. "It takes a lot of strength to take care of others when you're so young. I admire that about you." Her eyes met his, and for the first time she spoke more openly. "I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me. I just want someone to see that I'm trying, that I care, that I'm not giving up." He felt a lump in his throat. Her words were raw and honest, a reflection of a life far tougher than anything he had ever known. It reminded him of his own son, the boy who had always wanted to help others, who had insisted on sharing his toys, who had dreamed of making the world a better place. He wondered if this girl had been drawn to the cemetery for the same reason, seeking a quiet place to process, to reflect, to find some semblance of peace in a world that had not been kind. "Would you like to tell me about your family?" he asked gently. The girl hesitated, then nodded slightly. She pulled the bundle closer and carefully unfolded it. Inside were a few small photographs, worn and faded, of two younger children, a boy and a girl, both smiling shyly. She traced their faces with her fingers, her eyes softening. "This is my brother," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And this is my sister. They're all I have. I try to keep them safe, but it's hard. Sometimes I don't know if I'm doing enough." He looked at the pictures, seeing the innocence of children who deserved protection, care, and love. The thought that they depended on her alone made him feel both admiration and a deep sense of duty. He realized that helping this girl meant helping them as well. He wanted to offer them a chance at a better life, a safe life, but he also understood that it would require patience, trust, and respect. He could not simply swoop in and change everything. She needed someone who would listen, who would understand, who would stand by her without judgment. "You're doing everything you can," he said softly, "and that matters more than anything. You're protecting them, loving them, and that is a strength most adults would envy." For a moment, the girl simply looked at him, as if weighing his sincerity. Then she nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. "Most people just look away. They don't see us. They don't care." "I see you," he replied firmly, "and I do care. I want to understand. I want to help if I can." Her lips parted slightly in surprise, as though she had never expected anyone to say those words. She studied him carefully, trying to read the truth in his expression. There was no judgment, no pity, only an earnest desire to understand and support. It was a feeling she had rarely experienced in her short life, and it unsettled her in the best way possible. They sat together for hours, talking quietly about small things. Favorite foods, simple pleasures, the way sunlight looked when it hit the grass just right. The billionaire learned about the girl's favorite place to sit in the park, the games she played with her siblings when she had time, and the little joys that gave her life meaning even amidst hardship. In return, he shared small stories about his own family, carefully leaving out the parts that would overwhelm her with the tragedy of his loss. He wanted her to see him as a human being, not just a man of wealth, but someone who had experienced love, loss, and longing, just like her. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the cemetery, he realized it was time to leave. But the thought of walking away filled him with unease. He did not want this connection to end. He wanted to be there for her, to guide her, to provide some stability, even in small ways. "I'll come again," he said softly. "And next time, maybe we can talk some more. Maybe I can help you with things you need. Not just food, but anything that can make life a little easier for you and your siblings." She nodded, a faint smile appearing on her face. I'd like that," she said quietly. As he walked away, he felt a strange mix of hope and responsibility. This encounter, which had started as a brief meeting at a grave, had already begun to shift something inside him. It reminded him that even in sorrow, there could be moments of connection, of understanding, and of the chance to make a real difference in someone's life. That evening, back in his mansion, surrounded by wealth that now felt meaningless, he could not stop thinking about the girl and her siblings. He reviewed their conversation, replayed her words, and felt a growing determination. He knew he could not fix everything at once, but he could begin. He could offer guidance, safety, and support. He could help her see that there was more to life than survival, that there were people who cared, and that there was hope even in the darkest times. And so, a quiet plan began to form in his mind. One step at a time, he would reach out, build trust, and offer a lifeline to a girl who had known too much struggle and far too little kindness. He could not erase the hardships of her past, nor could he replace the family she had lost or the safety she had never known. But he could stand by her, help her, and ensure that her courage and strength were recognized, nurtured, and protected. As he prepared for the days ahead, he felt a subtle but profound shift within himself. He was no longer just a grieving father lost in sorrow. He had become someone who could act, who could create change, and who could extend the compassion and care his son would have wanted him to share with the world. That night, as he lay awake in the quiet of his home, he thought again of the girl at the cemetery, of her resilience, her honesty, and her hope, and he knew without a doubt that he would return. He would not turn away. He would walk the path of trust and connection, learning from her as much as she would learn from him, and together, they would begin a journey neither of them had anticipated, but one that could change both of their lives forever. The next morning, the billionaire found himself waking earlier than usual. Thoughts of the girl and her siblings filled his mind. He could not stop thinking about her resilience, her courage, and the quiet way she carried herself, even under immense pressure. Her presence had left a mark on him, not because of her misfortune, but because of the strength that shone through it. He had seen a side of life he had never faced before, one that no wealth could shield him from, and he knew he could not ignore it. By mid-morning, he returned to the cemetery, his steps measured, his mind focused. The air was crisp and the grass glistened with dew, giving the place a sense of freshness, of quiet life in contrast to the stillness of the gravestones. He spotted the girl sitting in her usual spot, her bundle resting beside her. She looked up as he approached, her expression a mixture of wariness and recognition. "Good morning," he said softly. She nodded but said nothing. He could see the tension in her posture, the way she hugged her bundle tightly as though it were the only thing protecting her from the world. He understood. Trust was difficult for her. Kindness was often rare and fleeting. He needed to be patient, to show her that his intentions were genuine. "I brought some food," he said, holding out a small bag, "and I thought we could talk for a while if you'd like." Her eyes flicked to the bag and then back to him. After a pause, she took it and murmured, "Thank you." Slowly, she unwrapped a small sandwich and ate it carefully. The man sat down a few feet away, not too close to invade her space, but near enough to show that he was present and willing to listen. For a while, they ate in silence, the sounds of the morning, the wind rustling the trees, distant birdsong filling the space between them. He watched her, noticing the small details, the way she adjusted her hair, the careful way she unwrapped her sandwich, the little hesitations in her movements that told him about her cautious nature. Finally, he spoke. "Yesterday you told me you move around a lot, that you take care of your brother and sister. Do you want to tell me more about them?" Her eyes softened and she shifted slightly. She reached into her bundle and pulled out a small, faded photograph. It showed two children smiling, their innocence untouched by the hardships around them. Her fingers lingered on the image as she spoke. "This is my brother, and this is my sister," she said softly. "They're all I have. I do my best for them, but sometimes I feel like I'm not enough." "You are enough," he said gently. "Taking care of them, making sure they survive, that is more than many adults could do. You're doing something amazing, even if it doesn't always feel like it." She looked at him, her eyes wide, as if the words were foreign to her. "You really think so?" "I do," he said firmly. "And I want to help in any way I can, not just with food, but with safety, with opportunities, with anything that can make your life easier." Her lips parted slightly as though she wanted to speak, but hesitation held her back. She had learned to be cautious, to trust very few people, and the sudden offer of support from a man she barely knew felt almost unreal. She glanced down at her bundle and took a deep breath. "There's something I want to tell you," she said finally, her voice small but determined. "Something. About your son." The man froze, his heart skipping a beat. He had not expected this, not so soon, and the thought that she might have known his son sent a rush of emotions through him. Curiosity, fear, hope, and a strange kind of anticipation. "Go on," he said softly. "You can tell me." She hesitated for a moment, her small hands clutching the bundle. Then she spoke, her words careful and measured. I met him a few months before he passed. At the community center. He helped us. He didn't know me personally, but he was always kind. He shared his time, he shared his books, and he made us feel seen." The man's throat tightened. Memories of his son flooded back. The boy's laughter, his curiosity, his eagerness to help others. He had known his son had a kind heart, but hearing it described through the words of a child who had felt its impact in a real way brought tears to his eyes. He remembered my name," the girl continued, "even though I was just one of many. He asked me about my life, about my siblings, and he encouraged me. He said that no matter how hard things got, I should never give up, that I had strength inside me, even if I didn't see it yet." The billionaire felt a wave of emotion that he could not contain. His son had touched someone's life, had left a mark in a world far beyond their own home, and now, That mark was being revealed to him in the most unexpected way. He realized that his grief, while still painful, was intertwined with a deep sense of pride. His son's kindness, his ability to see and help others, lived on through the impact he had made. "Your son," the girl continued, "he didn't just help me. He made me believe I could do more, that I could protect my siblings, that I could survive, and that there was still hope, even when everything seemed lost." The man nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "Thank you for telling me this," he said softly. "It means more than you can imagine to hear that he made a difference. I miss him terribly, and knowing that he touched your life, it gives me some comfort." For the first time, the girl looked at him with a new kind of understanding. I never met him properly, not in your house, not like family. But I know he cared. I know he wanted to help people like me, like my siblings. And I want to honor that. I want to keep trying, just like he wanted me to." The billionaire felt a lump in his throat. Here was a child, struggling and alone, speaking of hope and determination in a way that reminded him of everything he had loved about his son. He realized that helping her now was not just about kindness. It was about continuing his son's legacy. It was about turning grief into action, despair into compassion, and loss into something meaningful. "You have incredible strength," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "and I want to help you use it. Not to take over your life, not to control it, but to support you. To give you opportunities that no child should have to fight for alone." The girl hesitated, studying him. Trust was not given easily, and she had learned to protect herself with caution. But there was something in his eyes, in the way he spoke, that made her believe he meant every word. Slowly, she nodded. I'd like that," she said softly. Over the next few hours, they talked about her life in more detail. She told him about the small ways she and her siblings managed to survive, finding odd jobs, scavenging for necessities, and relying on the kindness of strangers when it appeared. She spoke of the constant fear that something might happen to them, the anxiety of never knowing where their next meal would come from, and the quiet pride she felt in being able to protect them despite her own struggles. The man listened intently, never interrupting, never judging. Each story, each struggle she recounted, brought a deeper understanding of the challenges she faced. He realized that her resilience was remarkable, but also that she deserved more than survival. She deserved safety, education, and the chance to dream. He asked gently, "Have you ever thought about what you want for your future?" She paused, considering the question. "Sometimes," she said finally, "I want to be able to help my siblings without fear. I want to make life better for them, and maybe someday I want to do more. I want to give back like your son did. But it feels impossible." "It's not impossible," he said firmly. "It's just a path that takes time, support, and guidance. And I want to be there to help you find that path." For the first time in a long while, the girl felt a sense of possibility. She had been surviving for so long, constantly aware of danger, hunger, and uncertainty, that the idea of someone truly caring about her future seemed almost unreal. Yet, sitting there with this man who had shown nothing but patience and respect, she allowed herself to imagine a life where hope was not just a fleeting thought, but something tangible. As the afternoon sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the cemetery, the billionaire realized it was time to leave. But this time he did not feel the pull of uncertainty or hesitation. He had heard her story, seen her strength, and understood the depth of her connection to his son. He knew that he could not walk away. He had to help, not just because of her, but because of the boy he had lost, the boy who had shown kindness and left a lasting impact. "I'll see you again soon," he said quietly, rising to his feet. "And we'll figure out ways to help you and your siblings, step by step." The girl nodded, a small, cautious smile appearing on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. I hope your son knew how much he mattered." "He did," the man said softly, "and I promise you, I will honor that too." As he walked away, the weight of grief he had carried for months felt slightly lighter. He realized that in helping this girl, he was not only supporting a child in need, but also keeping his son's memory alive in the most meaningful way possible. And in that quiet understanding, a new chapter was beginning, not just for the girl, but for him as well, a chapter full of hope, connection, and the possibility of healing. After that day at the cemetery, the billionaire could not stop thinking about the girl and her siblings. Her story stayed with him, filling his mind with images of a life far different from his own. He had grown up with comfort, protection, and opportunities he had taken for granted. But her life, full of struggle, uncertainty, and responsibility far beyond her years, made him realize that wealth alone was meaningless if it could not be used to help someone in need. He decided he needed to act, but he also knew he had to do it carefully. This was not about giving her money and walking away. It was about building trust, providing support, and allowing her to feel empowered rather than dependent. He spent hours planning, thinking about the best way to approach her and her siblings, how to earn their trust, and how to offer help in a way that respected their dignity. A few days later, he returned to the cemetery. The girl was sitting in her usual spot, her siblings not with her this time, which meant they were likely in the care of someone she trusted for a few hours. When she saw him approaching, she stiffened slightly, a cautious expression on her face. "Good morning," he said softly, holding a small bag with food. "I brought breakfast for you." She hesitated, then nodded, accepting it. "Thank you," she whispered. He sat a short distance away, careful not to crowd her. "I wanted to talk to you," he began. "About you and your siblings and about how I can help. Not to take over, but to make things a little easier." The girl looked at him, her eyes wide. I don't know if I can trust anyone," she said. "People promise things and then nothing." "I understand," he said gently. "I'm not asking for blind trust. I'm asking you to see if what I say feels real. You take it slowly, and if it doesn't work out, that's okay. But I want to help, and I won't give up on you or your siblings." Her gaze softened slightly, and she took a deep breath. "Okay," she said finally. Over the next few weeks, the billionaire took careful steps to support her. He arranged for her siblings to have proper meals and temporary safe shelter. He hired a trusted caretaker to check on them regularly, ensuring they were not only safe but also comfortable. The girl watched all of this with a mixture of caution and disbelief. She had never imagined that someone would go to such lengths to help her and her family without asking for anything in return. Gradually, he began helping the girl herself. He arranged for her to attend a local school, covering tuition and supplies, and provided a tutor to help her catch up on the lessons she had missed. He encouraged her to explore her interests and talents, reminding her that education was not just about survival, it was about building a life she could be proud of. At first, she was hesitant. School had always been a place of anxiety, filled with children who had homes, parents, and security she could only dream of. She struggled to adjust, sometimes feeling overwhelmed and unsure if she belonged. But he was patient, visiting her occasionally, offering encouragement and celebrating her small victories. He reminded her that learning was not a race, and that her efforts mattered more than immediate success. Slowly, the girl began to open up. She shared her dreams, small at first, like being able to read a book without worry or helping her siblings succeed in school. Over time, those dreams grew bigger. She wanted to learn skills that could help her support her family in the long term, to create stability, and maybe even help other children like her. The billionaire also encouraged her to express herself through writing. She began keeping a journal, recording her thoughts, experiences, and aspirations. The act of writing gave her a voice, a way to process the hardships she had endured and the hopes she held for the future. He would read her entries when she allowed, offering guidance and encouragement, always careful to respect her feelings and opinions. Her siblings, meanwhile, thrived under the small but steady support system he provided. The youngest, a boy of about 7, began to laugh more freely, his small hands no longer constantly searching for something to eat or a safe place to rest. The youngest girl, a little younger than her brother, began attending a daycare program where she learned to socialize and explore her environment safely. The older girl watched these changes with a mixture of pride and relief. She felt less burdened by fear and more capable of planning for a future she had once thought impossible. One afternoon, the billionaire sat with her at the park, watching the sun filter through the trees. He had brought a small picnic and spread a blanket on the grass. The girl sat cross-legged, her younger siblings nearby laughing and playing freely. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel normal, to forget the weight of survival and simply enjoy being a child again. "You've grown so much," he said softly, watching her smile. "I can see your strength, your courage, and your kindness. And I see how much your siblings love you for it." She blushed slightly, looking down at her hands. I just want to do right by them." That's all I've ever wanted. You are doing right by them, he assured her. And now you can also do right by yourself. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of relief and gratitude. She had spent years believing that her struggles were hers alone, that asking for help was a weakness. Now she understood that accepting support did not make her weak. It made her human. Over time, their bond deepened. The billionaire was careful not to overstep boundaries, always listening, always allowing her to make decisions about her life. He offered guidance, resources, and opportunities, but never forced her into situations she was not ready for. This approach helped her trust him, and it helped her believe that she could take control of her life with someone by her side, rather than under someone's control. As weeks turned into months, the changes in their lives became more evident. The girl's confidence grew, and she began to explore her interests beyond basic survival. She developed a love for reading and writing, creating small stories and poems that reflected her experiences and hopes. The billionaire encouraged this creativity, recognizing it as a vital outlet for her emotions and a way to build self-esteem. The siblings, too, began to flourish. The boy started school with enthusiasm, encouraged by the support he saw around him, and the youngest girl developed friendships and social skills that had been impossible before. Their laughter became a constant reminder of the power of stability, love, and care, the very things the billionaire had worked to provide. One day, as they sat together in the garden, the girl looked at him thoughtfully. "I never thought life could feel like this," she said quietly, "like I could actually have hope." "That's because you've carried so much for so long," he replied gently. "And now you're allowed to breathe, to dream, and to grow. You don't have to face everything alone anymore." Her gaze lingered on him, and for the first time she allowed herself to imagine a future that was not dictated by fear or survival. She thought about finishing school, learning skills that could help her family and maybe even helping other children who were struggling. She realized that her past, while painful, had given her strength and resilience that few could understand. And now, with guidance, care, and opportunity, she could turn that strength into something powerful. The billionaire watched her, a mixture of pride and hope swelling in his chest. He had set out to help a child in need, but in the process, he had discovered something equally profound for himself: the ability to turn grief into action, loss into compassion, and tragedy into a story of resilience and growth. By the end of the year, the changes were undeniable. The girl was excelling at school, her confidence shining in her posture, her words, and her decisions. Her siblings were thriving, safe, and happy in ways they had never experienced before. And the billionaire, though he still grieved for his son, found solace in the fact that his son's legacy of kindness lived on through this girl and her siblings. He realized that true impact was not measured by wealth or power, but by the lives one could touch, the hope one could inspire, and the love one could offer. And in helping this small family, he had not only changed their lives but also transformed his own understanding of grief, responsibility, and the meaning of legacy. The girl, once alone and struggling to survive, now had a life filled with opportunities, hope, and a network of support that allowed her to dream again. She understood that life would not always be easy, but she also knew that she was no longer facing it alone. And that realization gave her a strength that nothing could take away, a strength born from struggle, nurtured by care and empowered by opportunity. The billionaire continued to visit regularly, offering guidance, listening to her stories, and celebrating her successes. Together, they began planning for the future, discussing long-term goals, skills, and opportunities that would allow her to build a life of independence and purpose. Through patience, empathy, and persistent care, a bond had formed that was not just about wealth or charity, but about